2 years of marriage and not a single touch. Amelia Hart traced her fingers over the polished surface of the kitchen counter, counting the invisible spaces between her and Ethan Blackwood. The house was quiet, too quiet, filled with the echo of her own thoughts. She had learned early on to keep her expectations low. After all, the billionaire who had promised her a life of luxury had forgotten to include warmth, affection, or even the simplest gesture of human connection. Ethan entered the room, his sharp suit tailored perfectly, his expression unreadable as ever. His eyes scanned the papers in his hands, oblivious to the subtle longing in her gaze. Amelia felt the familiar pang of loneliness settle in her chest, heavier than the marble floors beneath her feet. She remembered the early days when she had imagined a marriage filled with laughter and shared secrets, not silent dinners and cold glances. A part of her wondered if he even noticed her existence anymore, if she had become nothing more than a fixture in his vast mansion. But tonight something stirred. Perhaps it was the way the lamplight caught the shadow under his eyes, hinting at weariness she had never been allowed to see before. Amelia stepped closer, her heart thumping, and reached for his hand. For a fleeting moment, she felt his warmth brush against her palm. Then it was gone, retracted with the practiced precision of a man who had learned not to feel. She sighed and stepped back, but the spark had been lit. Somewhere beneath that cold exterior was a man who, she hoped, could still be reached. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a tiny hope that tonight might be different. Ethan's office was dim, the glow of the city skyline casting long shadows across the floor. Amelia hesitated at the doorway, unsure if she should interrupt. She had learned the rules, his work came first always, but something about tonight felt different. She noticed him staring at a framed photograph on his desk, his jaw tight, eyes distant. The man she had married, who had once seemed untouchable, suddenly looked small, almost human. Ethan? Her voice was soft, cautious, yet it carried through the room like a fragile thread. He didn't look up immediately, but she saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze. Amelia stepped closer, drawn by the rare vulnerability she had been denied for so long. "I didn't know you kept that," she murmured, nodding toward the photo. He shifted, uncomfortable, yet he didn't dismiss her. For a moment, the silence between them was heavy but not cold. Amelia moved forward, letting instinct guide her. She wrapped her arms around him in a hug, hesitant, unsure if he would push her away. He froze at first, the tension in his body rigid, and for a heartbeat, Amelia thought he would withdraw. But then, slowly, ever so slightly, he relaxed against her. It wasn't full comfort yet, not the embrace of two people finally open to each other, but it was a start. It was the first crack in the walls he had built around himself, the first acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he wanted to be reached. When she pulled back, his gaze lingered on hers longer than usual, a silent question forming in the air between them. Amelia felt her heartbeat quicken, a tiny spark of hope igniting. Something in Ethan was changing, whether he realized it or not, and she felt the fragile thrill of possibility for the first time in years. The charity gala was bustling with voices and clinking glasses, but Amelia felt a strange calm as she navigated the crowd. She hadn't expected to see Ethan here, away from his office, away from the empire that consumed him. And yet, there he was, immaculate in his tuxedo, yet somehow less intimidating, somehow human. "Amelia." His voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. She looked up and met his eyes, surprised by a flicker of warmth she hadn't seen in years. For a moment, the world outside them blurred into a background hum. They were paired for a silent auction task, forced into proximity. As they moved side by side, their conversation flowed more easily than it had in months. Laughter came naturally, soft and unguarded, and Amelia noticed him glance at her as if discovering her all over again. When she reached for the auction item on a high shelf, Ethan instinctively steadied her by the waist, just a touch, just enough to make her pulse quicken. She didn't pull away. Instead, she felt a small thrill at the closeness, a reminder of what had been missing. Later, as they waited for the results of the auction, Ethan brushed her arm lightly in passing, an unspoken acknowledgement that her presence mattered. Amelia felt a warmth spreading in her chest, something she had thought lost forever. For the first time in a long time, she realized that the walls between them were thinning. The billionaire who had seemed untouchable was not just a shadow behind money and power. He was a man capable of connection, capable of noticing her, capable of change. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, their hands brushed briefly. It was only a touch, brief and fleeting, but it was enough to promise that this night might be the beginning of something entirely new. Amelia hadn't expected him to invite her to the study that evening, the room dimly lit with the soft glow of a single lamp. She hesitated at the doorway, sensing a change in the air. Ethan closed the door behind her, a rare pause in his otherwise relentless pace, and finally looked at her, not with business calculation, but with something softer, more vulnerable. "I've been afraid," he admitted, his voice low, almost trembling. "Afraid of failing again. Afraid of hurting you or myself." Amelia's heart tightened. She had lived in the shadow of this fear for 2 years, feeling the distance that had grown between them. Yet here he was, finally opening a door she thought had been sealed forever. She stepped closer, feeling the space between them shrink as his words lingered. "I felt lonely too," she confessed, her own voice shaking slightly. "Lonely in a house full of things, lonely in a marriage that feels like a formality." Ethan's eyes softened, the hardness she had known for so long melting into something fragile. He took a hesitant step toward her, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the billionaire, the man who wanted to be understood, who wanted to be close. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him in a hug, long and quiet. He stiffened at first, then slowly, hesitantly returned the embrace. It wasn't passionate or overt, it was tentative, careful, but it carried the weight of 2 years of longing and unspoken words. Pulling back just slightly, their eyes met, and for the first time the silence between them was comforting, not painful. In that moment, Amelia felt a spark of hope. Hope that the walls between them were not permanent, that the man she had married could still become the man she had imagined. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that tonight, everything could change. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden as Amelia followed Ethan down the quiet path behind the house. For the first time in years he had invited her out, not for a meeting, not for a charity event, but just to walk. The moon cast a gentle glow, and the city lights shimmered in the distance, painting the night with a soft, hopeful hue. They walked side by side, not speaking at first, letting the silence between them be comfortable instead of suffocating. Then Ethan spoke, low and thoughtful. "I forget sometimes how much I've shut you out," he said. Amelia glanced at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "You weren't always like this," she whispered, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. He felt the touch, subtle yet deliberate, and looked down at her hand, hesitating before letting it linger for a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was a small gesture, but for them, it carried a world of meaning. They laughed softly at a shared memory from years ago, the kind that reminded them of the people they used to be before the walls, before the distance. At one point, Amelia stumbled on the path, and Ethan's hand reached out instantly to steady her. She didn't pull away, letting herself lean into the touch, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in years. Finally they paused by the fountain, the water reflecting the moonlight. Ethan turned to her, eyes searching, and wrapped her in a long, quiet hug. No words were needed. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was a promise of presence, of understanding, of something new beginning. Amelia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. And for the first time in 2 years she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this night could be the start of everything they had lost. The old cafe stood quiet, almost frozen in time, and Amelia felt a wave of nostalgia as she stepped inside. This was the place where she and Ethan had first met, years before the mansion, the empire, and the silence that had grown between them. She hadn't expected him to suggest coming here, yet there he was, standing by the doorway with a faint smile she hadn't seen in a long time. "Remember this place?" he asked, voice soft, almost unsure. She nodded, feeling the memories rise unbidden. Laughter over spilled coffee, conversations that stretched into the night, a warmth she had thought was gone forever. They settled into the corner booth, side by side, and began to talk. Not about work, not about obligations, but about moments, memories, the little things that had once mattered so much. Amelia found herself laughing freely, a sound that surprised even her. Ethan's eyes followed her every gesture, lingering with curiosity and something tender, something that had been buried beneath years of distance. At one point, Amelia reached for the salt shaker and Ethan's hand brushed hers. The contact was brief, almost accidental, yet it sent a familiar spark through her chest. She let her hand rest near his, not moving away. Slowly, almost instinctively, she leaned against him as he explained a funny mishap from his past. The proximity felt natural, comforting. For a moment time seemed to slow. The bustling city outside vanished, leaving only the two of them, connected by shared history and fragile hope. Ethan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, and Amelia felt the tension she had carried for years begin to dissolve. When they finally left the cafe, side by side, Amelia realized something that both thrilled and frightened her. The man she had married was still in there, still capable of warmth, still capable of letting her in. And tonight she wasn't afraid to try. Amelia's phone rang just as she was about to leave work. The news was small but stressful, a family matter needing immediate attention. Her heart raced as she tried to manage the sudden panic. Before she could react, Ethan's voice came through the line. "I'll come with you," he said simply, no questions, no hesitation. The surprise in her chest made her pause. 2 years of silence, and yet here he was, stepping into her world without being asked. By the time they arrived, Amelia felt tense, anxious, and vulnerable. But Ethan stayed close, his presence steady and unshakable. When a minor complication arose, she froze, feeling overwhelmed. Without a word, Ethan gently guided her to a quiet corner, his hand lightly resting on her back. She leaned into him instinctively, feeling a sense of safety she hadn't known for years. "Hey," he murmured softly, his forehead brushing hers. "I've got you." The words, simple and unadorned, carried a weight she hadn't expected. She closed her eyes and let herself melt into the comfort of his embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amelia felt the warmth of being truly cared for. Ethan's arms around her weren't just a hug. They were a bridge over the years of distance, a promise that he was here and he wasn't leaving. When they finally pulled apart, their eyes met and neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The first touch, the first real connection after years apart, had shifted something deep inside both of them. The walls they had built were cracking gently but surely, and Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Tonight had changed everything. For the first time, she believed that their marriage could be more than silence and routine. It could be something alive, tender, and real. Ethan's car hummed quietly as they drove toward the cabin he had reserved for the weekend. Amelia stared out the window, the city fading behind them, replaced by trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. The silence inside the car wasn't heavy this time, it was peaceful, almost comforting. When they arrived, the cabin felt like a world apart, cozy and warm, untouched by the demands of their lives. Amelia hesitated at the threshold, then stepped inside, feeling the comforting weight of Ethan's presence behind her. He watched her with a small, genuine smile, the kind she hadn't seen in years. They spent the evening cooking together, laughing over minor mishaps in the kitchen. Amelia brushed past him accidentally and he didn't pull away. Later, as they cleaned the counter, their hands met briefly, lingering a moment longer than necessary. The touch was light, subtle, yet it carried a promise of closeness, understanding, and tenderness that had been absent for far too long. Afterward, they settled in the living room with mugs of tea, talking about memories, dreams, and fears. Ethan's arm found its way around her shoulders, hesitant at first, then firm, as if testing a boundary he had long avoided. Amelia leaned into him, allowing herself to feel safe and cherished. The hours passed unnoticed, filled with small gestures, holding hands while walking to the balcony, brushing away stray strands of hair, sharing quiet laughter in the glow of the fire. Each moment deepened their bond, revealing a side of Ethan she had thought lost, a side capable of warmth, patience, and love. As Amelia drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in the comfort of his arms, she realized that their connection was no longer just tentative. It was growing, slowly but surely, blossoming into something beautiful, something real. For the first time in years she felt hopeful. The rain fell softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse of Amelia's thoughts. She and Ethan sat across from each other, the space between them filled with unspoken words and lingering questions. For years, fear had been the invisible third person in their marriage. The fear of failing, of being hurt, of losing each other without ever truly trying. "I don't want to mess this up again," Ethan admitted, his voice low and raw. "I've spent too long building walls, and now I'm scared I won't know how to tear them down properly." Amelia reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "We've both been afraid," she said gently. "But we're here now. And I want to try, with you." He looked at her for a long moment and then, slowly, he rose. The air between them seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stepped closer, closing the distance he had kept for so long. His arms wrapped around her in a long, comforting embrace, and she leaned into him, feeling the years of silence and loneliness begin to dissolve. The rain outside mirrored the cleansing they felt inside, washing away doubts and hesitation. There was no rush, no urgency, just two people rediscovering the comfort of closeness, the joy of connection they had denied themselves for far too long. Amelia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and realized that trust was no longer a fragile hope, it was growing stronger with each gentle touch. Ethan's embrace held no expectations, only presence, and that was enough. For the first time in years, fear no longer dictated their marriage. Tonight, they had begun to break free, to embrace the warmth they had longed for, and to step toward the love they had almost forgotten was possible. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. Amelia walked through the hallway, her hand brushing against the wall as if tracing the memories they had rebuilt together. Ethan followed, slower this time, not with the rush of business but with intention, with presence. He stopped beside her and took her hand, holding it gently, firmly, letting her feel the steady warmth he had kept hidden for so long. "I love you," he said, the words simple, yet carrying the weight of every year they had lost. Amelia's breath caught, and a smile broke across her face, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes, that lights up the soul. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy and relief. They stepped into the living room, where soft lights cast a glow over the space they had slowly filled with warmth, laughter, and connection. Ethan wrapped Amelia in a hug that felt like home, a long, lingering embrace where time ceased to exist. There were no walls now, no fear, only the undeniable bond of two hearts that had rediscovered each other. They stayed like that for a long moment, letting the closeness speak everything words could not. Amelia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he held her as if he would never let go. In that embrace they found forgiveness, understanding, and the promise of forever. Tonight, the house felt alive, not with the echoes of silence, but with the heartbeat of a marriage reborn. 2 years of longing, waiting, and fear had led them here, to a love steady, tender, and real. And as they finally pulled back, eyes locked and hearts aligned, Amelia knew that this was only the beginning.